Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Welcome everyone to the December 13th Midweek Inspiration Service here at Heartlight Spiritual Center in Charlotte, North Carolina. And welcome to all those people who are joining us online, as well as the people here in the room, and for those people who will join us later on in the replay. Welcome and happy Hanukkah to those people who are celebrating Hanukkah at this time. Yeah, my name is Mark Hunter Brooks. I'll be filling in for David Hulse today. And today we're going to be interviewing Jibril Al-Sadat, my friend.
Right.
And he's had a very interesting life, but it's also led to some significant developments for him spiritually, and we're going to talk about that as we go through this discussion today. So first, Jibril, I want to ask you a little bit about your clothes.
Okay, then. Let me start off, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, in the name of Allah, the compassionate, the merciful. And I also want to say, let us all give thanks to David. Hopefully that he went well with his procedure and that he's doing well, and we send our prayers and our love to him. And I thank him for giving me this opportunity to sit in for him and to talk and to have this interview. So I wanted to say that to begin with. Why do you want to know why do I wear what I wear?
Yeah, why are you all dressed in white?
Well, and being in the South and being that it's past Labor Day, it makes me stand out a little bit more, but I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
I'm just kidding. The reason I wear white, a lot of people don't understand. Some people think it's purity. Some people think you want to show up. No. The reason I wear white is because as Plato once said, to understand life, you need to talk to someone who knows about death, because life and death is one. In Islam, when you are buried, they take your body, they wash it, they shave certain parts of it, and then they wrap it in 2 white pieces of cloth, which is called a shroud. And then we are buried, or, in my case, I'm going against Islam, I'm gonna be created. The reason why I wear what I wear is because I wear 2 pieces of white cloth to remind me that death is with us at all times. So I enjoy life because I get up every day knowing that it could be my last day. So just like I'm sitting here enjoying fellowship with you people, I enjoy life. I enjoy every minute of it. And in the West, particularly, we are always afraid of death, which, I'll get back to, we're going to talk about fear in a while, which always I find kind of strange, because the minute we are born is the minute we die. And why should we be afraid of something that we cannot stop? So we should embrace life because we embrace death. There's nothing wrong with it. It's not morbid. It's not anything, because like I said, and then you have to understand also, if you believe in science, as Mark does, as most of us do, what are you made of? You're made of energy and matter. What is the first thing you learn in physics? You cannot destroy energy and matter. Right? There's certain laws in the universe that you cannot break. Energy and matter cannot be destroyed. So what are we talking about when death comes? Are we talking about the ending of who we are? No. We're talking about the ending of an ego. I used to stand up in front of my classes. By the way, I used to teach Introduction to Philosophy and Introduction to Ethics. And I would stand up in front of my classmates and I would ask them, who are you? And the first thing, like anybody would do, is they'd give me their name. And I'm like, no, that's not who you are. That's who your parents named you. So then they would give me something they did. And I'm like, no, that's not who you are. That's an occupation. So after I go down, 5 questions, they get frustrated and they get angry. And then they say, well, do you know who you are? And I said, yes, I do. And they said, who are you? I'm like, I'm not going to tell you. Because it took me a long time to find out. Because it takes us all a long time to find out. What is the one thing that goes through all religion and all philosophy is to know thyself. And what does it say in the Christian Bible? If you know yourself, you know your creator. You know your God. That's how you get closer to God. You get closer to God by learning out who you are. Why? It's because the divine is within you.
Yeah.
you know.
So
Go ahead.
Jibril, you are a Muslim
Yes,
and a Sufi.
yes.
And for those of you who don't know what Sufism is, if you could explain the difference between Islam and Sufism, the similarities and differences, and how it may compare to other religions.
Okay then. Well, in all religions, there's an esoteric, which is an outside part of religion: Christianity, Judaism, Buddhism, Islam, Taoism, and then there's an inner core. The inner core of all religions is what I believe, as I've been studying all the way from Mesopotamia to ancient Egypt, ancient Greece, all the way back to the Vedics in India, is what is called the Prisca Theologia, an ancient religion. They say the religion is so old it came down from Adam, and it runs through all religion. It's not so much a religion as a wisdom, a philosophy that runs through all the religions, through all different cultures. In Sufism, it came up through Neoplatism. It came up through Plato, Pythagoras, going all the way back to the ancient Egyptian mystery cults. And it's the inside of Islam. Islam, you have the orthodoxy, like all religions. You have the rituals, you have the doctrine, right? You have the dogma. You have the law, which is Sharia. And in Sufism, we say you have the Sharia, which is the law. You have the Tariqah, which is what you call Islam, the spiritual part of the mystical part of it. And then you have Haqiqah, which is the truth. And you need all three of them. You need the law, the Sharia, to center yourself. And the analogy I used, which me and Mark had our podcast, was like, it is the dock, right? It is the thing that's going to keep you on the straight path, right? Because that's what Sharia means, is a path, right? And then you need the tariqah, right? So the tariqah would be like a boat out in the ocean, but it's tethered to the dock, right? That's the spiritual part of your life, you know? That's the thing that, you know, as you grow and grow, and I like to use the analogy, if you're out there on the ocean in the boat, you start off, you tethered to the dock, right? So you tethered to your religion. So you decide to get some oars, and you row a little bit, and your spirituality grows. And then as your spirituality grows, you take the oars, and you put them up, and you take a cloth off your back, and you put it, and then you have a sail. So you can go a little bit further, right? And the tether starts getting a little bit tight. And then all of a sudden your spirituality grows, and you take the thing, and you take the sail off, and you take the two rows, and you start paddling them together, and you make a motor out of it. And then sooner or later, your spirituality can grow so much that you can go away from the dock and the tether would break. That's how your spirituality grows, and that's how you get free of your religion. You don't lose your religion. You just, through being tethered to the religion to start with, your spirituality grows to the point where you don't need it anymore. You outgrow your religion. That doesn't mean your religion was bad or good. It means your religion was necessary to give you structure. And what we have too many times, often, especially with younger kids, and I'm not here to knock younger people because I was young at one time too, believe it or not. And I love young people, is that too many of them like to say, I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious, which is all right. But you need religion to mold you so you can grow spiritually, so you can eventually cut it away. What happens now is, in all religions now, we have too many, what they say, that God hates more than anything else, is hypocrites. We got too many people who use religion for political reasons, for power reasons, for war, for all kinds of things. And I understand why, especially younger people turn against religion, because they say, I don't see any value in it. Number one, the reason they don't see any value in it because they never were settled in a religion, right? My father was a Muslim, my mother was a great Southern Baptist, My father died in 64, so I learned most of my religion from my mother, right? When she was trying to convert us and stuff like that. You know, I learned all my gospel songs from her. And I love reading the Bible with, especially, we call it, the Christians call it the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible, because I love the wars, the fighting, you know, the miracles. I love it. And then I love the Gospels. You know, I love reading about Jesus, Son of Mary. And I had a good grounding. So when I did finally circle back to Islam, I had all that to hold me down. So when I added Islam on top of it, it made it sense. You know, so I can understand all the Abrahamic faith, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and I can understand how they work together. What happens is too many of us only know of one tradition. We should all learn at least another tradition so we can understand that we don't have this attitude, this parochial attitude that only my religion is right. That's all, you know, there's a saying that a lot of people heard, there's many ways to God, right? And then when you study religion like I have, and you study the 8 major religions, you find a commonality that comes back to, I will never ask some ex-professor a question because he would go off on that. That goes back to Sufism, is that Sufism is the nut, is the core within the nut, within the shell. It's the inside, the spirituality of Islam. It's the mysticism of Islam where you're trying to get close to the beloved. The way I live my life, including now, is all times I think of the divine. I think of the divine when I'm eating. I think of the divine when I'm driving. I think of the divine when I'm resting. I think of the divine as I'm sitting here speaking to you. Your whole life, your whole being, every cell in your body is trying to get close to the divine. Yeah. That's what Sufism is. Yeah. You never can unite with the one because it has no boundaries. As soon as you say God is this, it's not the one. The one is the beginning and the end. The one is the one in the many. There's no opposites in the one. That's what makes us different from God, is because we see opposites, even though we're one. Yeah. People ask me, you know, I tell people, you know, and this has to do with Sufism too, is that why, when you go anywhere you go, you feel comfortable. And I tell people it's because when I go somewhere, I never meet a stranger. And they're like, how can that be? And I said, I never meet a stranger because I met that person before, because when I meet that person, I meet myself. Because I realize we're all one. There are no strangers, you know. And when you get to a point, as we would deal with your spirituality, and you can see yourself, as I do when I look around this room, and all people, it's a difference. And that's what Sufism is all about. And, you know, it doesn't matter what label that you put on your name. You know, you put on, you know, what you are. I'm a Christian, I'm a Buddhist, I'm a Taoism, you know, I'm a Hindu or whatever. It doesn't matter. Most of those are cultural affectations. You know, all prophets came to all people at all times, at different times. You know, there's not only one truth, there's many truths. But there's only one reality, right? You have to ask yourself, what do you consider true? And how many things can be true at the same time? You can be female, you can be an American, right? You can be a North Carolinian, you can be a North Carolinian and an Illinoisan at the same time. There's many truths, right? But then there's one reality, and the reality is that right now, as finite human beings living this life, we're trying to find out what is after this. Yeah. The first question you ask yourself when you get here is, who am I? Then you ask, what is this life is all about? And then you ask what's going to happen after this life. And that's the one that scares people.
Yeah.
You know, that's the one people don't want to live, don't want to think about. My sister is 72 years old. She said she's going to live to be 100. I asked, why? I don't want to live to be 100. You know, I mean, as long as I can get around, move around, do around, you know, I'm good. But, you know, time and place. As long as I live a good life, as long as I treat people well, my time is already set. So I'm not going to worry about it. It's what I do right here. Okay, if I'm 72 years old and I say, I give you a perfect example. My mother-in-law. Now I'm not going to give you mother-in-law jokes, but my mother-in-law really, she's a rough woman, right? And for 40 years she hated me. Don't know why. You know, I wasn't exactly a nice person myself when she met me when I was in my teens, right? And I took her daughter, her oldest daughter, and married her. So, you know, she had her reasons, right? But for 40 years, she hated me. Now, if you go talk to her now, she loved me to death, right? But the thing with my mother-in-law, and I try to help her, you know, as she getting close to her, because I tell her, I say, you know, Annie, I see the light. And you 15 years older than me. The light should be blinding you. So we should enjoy each day that we live in instead of worrying about my TV don't work, this person's coming in here, this person. I'm like, why are you doing that? When you have a finite amount of time, you should enjoy your life. You should enjoy every day. You should enjoy the little things in life because they're the things that give you pleasure. What we do is because we always worried about what's going to happen next or what happened in the past, we do not spend time to enjoy what's going on now.
Yeah. So, Jibril, speaking about what's going on now in your life and spirituality, there were 4 points in your life where it affected your spiritual development. And for the people here in the audience and online, I hope you may be able to resonate with some of these stories that he talks about, and maybe when we get to Q&A at the end of his talk or our conversation, you can ask what resonates with you and ask him a little bit more. But tell us a little bit about your life. You grew up in Chicago, and you were in the military, and then you were a chef. He was an executive chef, which I thought was pretty cool. And then a philosopher. So you've actually lived about 4 lives.
Yeah, I did. I mean, and they weren't planned either. Neither one of them was planned. Okay, the first thing that happened, I wrote a story about it, was in 1964, like I said, my father died. That was a big shock to me. Before my father died, I was a nice kid. And I believed everything was good in the world. I've never seen anything bad. All I knew was love, right? And my father died of cancer. And it changed my life. That was in 64. In 66, Martin Luther King Jr. came to the west side of Chicago because of housing. And my mother, because she was big in the community and she owned a lot of buildings and stuff like that, she decided, you know, we went down there and seen him. She decided to join a march with him in the white neighborhood called Marquette Park. It's all, you can Google all this, right? And I was a young kid, and I went with my mother because my brothers and them didn't want to go because they were older, and you know, if they went into that kind of neighborhood, you know, it would have been not great. So I went there in '66, and I'm telling you, I learned about human beings, but not in a nice way. I think they bust Martin Luther King's head open with a brick or a bottle, and he said that out of all the places he'd been in the South, he had never been anywhere as rough as Chicago, right? Trying to open up those neighborhoods. And then after that, in '68, which was another change in my life, was when Martin Luther King Jr. died in April. And we had a riot, which I was part of, in Chicago. We burned down most of the west side of Chicago. And to this day, they still haven't rebuilt it. And that was over 50 years ago, right? And so in '69, I decided to join the street gang. And so that took me from the nice kid I was just 5 years earlier. Then I became I guess you say I became vicious. I had made up a mind to myself, and I said that I'm gonna give more pain than people can take, and I'm gonna take more pain than people can give. And for the next 20 years, that's how I lived my life, you know? And I dropped out of school in 6th grade, and I went on the streets, and, you know, I lived that life. And then one day in 1974, a judge came to me and said, you go in the military, you go to jail. So I figured, you know, I'd go in the military, right? Even though I lived in a neighborhood where, and it's still this way, 75% of the young black men in the Lawndale area on the west side of Chicago, they're in the criminal justice system. It's to that day it's that way to the day. You have grandfathers, fathers, grandsons, and not great-grandsons in the same penal system. It hasn't changed. It hasn't changed at all. And we used to call going to jail college. Because that's where we learn things at. You go to jail to learn to be a better crook, you know, a better thief. I mean, that's just how it was. So this was not abnormal. See, people don't understand that. You know, when you live a different kind of life, all this stuff seems abnormal. But when you in there in that milieu, it becomes normal. Because everybody that you know is doing that. And so that's how you realize that, okay, you know, I'm gonna do this too. So what came to me was when I went to the Army, somebody asked me, what state do you come from? And I said, Chicago. And they told me, they said, Chicago's not a state, it's a city. Chicago is a city in Illinois. Then I realized how dumb I was. Then I realized that I didn't have the intellectual capacity to navigate this world because I didn't understand what it was about. Plus, when I first traveled, they sent me down to Missouri to Fort Leonard Wood. And I thought, and I know this is gonna sound silly, because I never in all these years have come off the west side, you know, and of Chicago. I thought the grass would be different. I thought the sky would be a different color. Because you remember TV was black and white back then. And, you know, we didn't have Google and we didn't have all this other stuff, you know, even though, you know, because I had a lack of education, what I used to do, I was an autodidact. I used to go to Salvation Army and I could buy these books for like 25 cents, whatever, and I could read them. I didn't understand them, but I could read them. So because I didn't go to high school, I would buy all these books about the Encyclopedia Britannica, so I learned about history. I learned about all the kings of England and France and all the czars, and I loved history and learned about the wars and what, you know, to understand how people reacted to each other. But I didn't have a formal education. I didn't understand at the time how limited my knowledge of the world or my knowledge of myself was. So those were the two things that changed me. You can say one of the third things that changed me really was when I got married. Because I was the kind of guy that I never wanted to get married, never thought I was gonna get married, never wanted to have kids. But like I said, when I seen my wife, I knew I was gonna marry her. It was like, it wasn't a choice. It was like it was a fait accompli. And matter of fact, in January of 1979, I was in Chicago and she was asking me when I was gonna come back, you know, because we had got engaged. And I drove all the way through a blizzard. And you can look that up too, the blizzard, to get, okay then, so you know that it was a bad blizzard. And I drove all the way through a blizzard to get back to her because I knew I was supposed to have married that woman. And the last change I had, I think, it was all this time, from 1969, all this time, I was not a nice person. And my wife married me anyway, I don't know, and I had kids, and you know, they can tell you, man, Dad was something else when he was, you know, when I was younger, right? Because I had all my kids when I was younger, in my 20s. And then when I turned 35, and I didn't have an epiphany or anything like that, something just came over me and I said, I didn't want to be that person anymore. I don't know why. I just said, I didn't want to be that person anymore. I made a choice. And that's why, I used to tell my students, and I tell these young men that I see on the street, if you don't like your life story, change your story. Make a choice. We all got stories. Mark, you like to always tell me to tell your stories, I'm like, what's so interesting about my story that everybody has a story? Everybody has a story. So change your story. If you don't like the way your life is going, make a decision, because that's why we have free will, right? So do that and change it and become a different person. I don't know if I became a better person, but I wasn't angry anymore. I didn't have to look behind my back anymore. And when I started smiling, people actually smiled back. Instead of running away from me, people started running to me. It was a fundamental change that I liked, and it felt good. It felt good. When you look in people's faces and they look back at you, you see a smile, you don't see fear. And that's a good thing. Because when you live that kind of life that I lived on the street, you live by people being afraid of you. And the longer you live is because how much fear that you can imbue to the people. So that's how you survive. It's like being in the jungle. It is a jungle, And if you show any weakness, everybody gonna come after you. So that was my last change when I was 35. And then I started studying philosophy, but I wasn't studying Western philosophy. I started studying Zen, Taoism, yoga, trying to understand what it meant to be a human being, because I spent all those years, in such darkness and such negativity. So I wanted to add a little light to my life, and I wanted to add a little understanding. And at the same time, being a chef, you have to have a great ego. Every chef thinks his food is the best. Nobody can cook like you. Nobody, seriously. And you cannot be a great chef unless you have an ego. Your ego dominates you, right? And I always used to tell my cooks, when a chef comes into the restaurant or whatever, his personality yes. People know you in the building before they can see you. At least that's the way it was with me, And even when I leave, and I have all these questions, and people constantly chef. And it just feeds on your ego, right? And you're the best in the world, and then people, they come back there and they tell you how great your food is, and they want to give you money and give you bottles of wines and all this. So, it just builds you up and builds you up and builds you up. Go, I'm sorry.
So I was going to say, just to kind of underscore what he was talking about with his chef stuff, you got standing ovations for your food.
Yeah.
And you were an executive chef for some pretty influential people in South Charlotte.
Yeah, Charlotte, Mr. Belk, the guy, I can't say his name, that owned South Park. He owned all that out there. I did open Oprah Winfrey's restaurant in Chicago. I worked for Jean Banchet, who was the #1 French chef in America in the 70s, at Mémançon. And, like I said, I had a big ego, because before I came south, I only worked the top restaurants or the top hotels, because I had a classical French background, because I studied at Le Cordon Bleu. So I only worked these places. And then when I came south, that's when my ego really had to go, because I had to learn how to cook hamburgers. I had to learn how to fry chicken. The first country club I worked in was in Winston-Salem. And you have to understand, these country clubs have these old line families that have been in this country club since antebellum, before the Civil War. So these families been in these places for millennia. And the people who worked there, a lot of the blacks who worked there have been working there for 30 years, 40 years. They knew the grandfather, the father, the son, they knew everybody. And I had to get used to, cooking all this, and they eat certain things, right? When they had their lamb, they wanted their mint jelly, which, I always made a nice rosemary sauce, but they wanted mint jelly. You had to give them mint jelly. They I'm not knocking it, but I'm just saying it was a different. I was used to putting a nice rosemary sauce or something else on a lamb chop, but they wanted mint jelly, nothing else. No sauce. Did you put that stuff? Don't put that gravy on my thing. I'm like, that's not a gravy, that's sauce, right? And the number one thing that they loved to eat was salmon with barbecue sauce. At the time, I was like, oh no, I can't do it. But that was the number one seller. So I had to learn, and I had to adjust, and I had to adapt. And so I had to learn to take my ego and tame it a little bit, because I was like, when I first started, I was like, do you know who I am and who I've cooked for and what kind of food I can do? I mean, I can make miracles, right? And they were like, nah, I want my steak well done. Yeah. Just give me my steak well done, give me a little mustard, and I'm good, right? So, but then I learned that I came to the South for a reason. It was learned to put my ego on hold. Because like my old master once told me, he said, you either ride the donkey or the donkey rides you. No matter how smart you are, you can be the smartest person in the world, but you can be a donkey with a bunch of books, right? It's not going to do you any good. So what I had to learn is slowly to get rid of my ego. Because the ego, and you ask, okay, what is your ego? Your ego is the thing that tells you who you are. Your ego say, I am so-and-so, I've done so-and-so. My ego used to tell me, I'm chef. No, I'm not. It's just something I did. But if you ask any chef, who are they? I'm a chef. Or you ask a lawyer who you are, I'm a lawyer. No, it's just something you do. It's not who you truly are, right? And so I had to learn to take my ego and to clamp down on my ego, because spiritually, you cannot grow if you hold on to the I. You cannot see the we if you're always worried about the I. Me. You don't see the we. So nowadays when I cook, I try to cook good food. I hope people like it, but that's not my number one thing. I try to bring pleasure to people, because being a servant is more important than saying I'm a great chef, I'm a good cook, whatever. I try to be a good servant, right? Because in the end, what are we all here for? We're all here for to give service to each other. That's how we see the divine in each other. That's how we find the divine in ourselves. Is to be good servants to each other, to do right by each other.
So that sounds philosophical. And I know
it is.
You taught philosophy at UNC Charlotte.
Yes, because I'm starting to realize, even like I said this morning, I was reading Hermetic philosophy, is that even though we call it religion, we get it from the Italian regolare, the word religion, I believe all these different traditions were wisdom traditions. What we call religions, where we put the dogma and the ritual and the thing. Because what happened was, before there was even a Rome, the Mesopotamians, the Egyptians, the Chinese, the Indians, they were doing something that when the Europeans came there and said, okay, we have this thing we call religion. They doing something that is similar to what we doing, so they must be doing religion. But it's just wisdom traditions. It was a way to live. It wasn't about, how I'm going to perform a religion just to get closer to my God. It's how I'm going to live my life. These was ethical and moral traditions that was trying to teach us how do we treat each other, and if we learn how to treat each other, to get closer to our Creator. That's what they're all about. That's what the mystery cults were all about in Egypt and in Greece. It's all about how do we understand this wisdom this knowledge. What is wisdom? Wisdom is knowledge and experience. How do we understand this wisdom so we can learn more about ourselves? Because that's how we get closer to our Creator, closer to the divine. And that's what it means to be truly wise. You know? And that's what we try, and that's what I understood. I call it religion because now, you know, all these centuries and stuff like that, people call it religion now, and you know, I got a degree that says religious studies, so it's religion now, right? It's not going to say wisdom studies. But what we try to do now in religion is we try to understand, we follow the dogma, we follow the ritual, we follow the if you look at, and I do, and I read different revelations. I read the Upanishads, I read the Bhagavad Gita, I read the Tao Te Ching, the Christian Bible, I read the Hebrew Bible, I read the Quran. When you read these texts are all about wisdom, right? When you read the text, they're all trying to tell you something. They all have an ethical and moral story to them. Think about the parables that Jesus used to speak about. Think about it. And then think about the wisdom that he was trying to convey to his disciples. You know, when you read these, and when you read these different revelations, you also see the similarities in them also. There's a golden rule worded different in every one of the major religions. Do unto others as you wish others to do unto you. Is that just an accident? Did they copy off of each other? Even though, you know, Christianity copied off of Judaism and Islam copied off of both of them, but in the way, in Buddhism copied off of Hinduism, but that happens. Nothing starts in a you blank. You cannot come up to me like the story of Abraham, right? Abraham turned against his father when he was in Ur. He told his father, I can't worship the gods you worship. I have to worship El, right? So the father turned against Abraham, and Abraham had to take his people and he had to leave, right? And that's how he ended up in the land of Canaan, which they still killing each other over. After all these years, they're still doing the same thing. But the thing is that you cannot take something and start it off with a blank slate. You always have to take a piece of it. If you read the Bible, the Hebrew Bible, there's a lot of stories in there that if you read, if you look at the religion of Mesopotamia, or you look at read the religion of Egypt, there's a lot of stories that are similarities. There's flood stories, right? There's stories of the beginning, right? Same way with Zoroastrianism, right? Everybody is connected in all these stories. Culturally, they might be a little bit different, but there's a lot of similarities in there. And that's not by accident, because they didn't have Google back then. You know, they couldn't, you know, they were thousands of miles away from each other. Probably they didn't even know the other one existed. And they came up with all these different stories. Unlike now, myths used to be just stories. You know, now we believe myths mean false. You know, the myth has to be a lie. It can't be true because it's a myth. No, myths were just stories. They're not true or false. They were just stories. Stories that people told to have some understanding. And I'll give you a perfect example. How much time we on? Because I got to get to the fear part.
Just a few minutes.
I give you a perfect example. Like, and I was telling Johnny this the other day, you know, the reason why religion has an ethical part to it is because we had to have some kind of, as Rousseau's called it, a social contract to live amongst each other. And as I was telling, you know, Johnny the other day, it's like, if you got this guy named Ugg, right? And Ugg is over there in his hut, and he got a woman. And I'm sitting over here, and I'm listening to Ugg and his woman, and I'm seeing what they doing. I'm sitting over here, and all I got is a stick. Right? So, you know, me being a human being and me having base instincts, I'm getting jealous. So I go over there and I knock the hell out of Ugg and I take his woman. Okay? That's not right. How can we live that way? So the first laws we had was the Mesopotamians, the laws of Hammurabi. Laws about how we can live together as a community. That's how religion started. We had to have laws so we could deal with each other, so we wouldn't be like the lesser animals, right? Where you just, only the strongest survive, even though we do go back to that base of nature, And that's what religion grew out of that, these different ethical and moral laws. We're like, thou shalt not steal, But it's not only do you need it written down, you know that. I don't have to tell you that. Even when you're a kid, okay, I want that candy. I know I ain't supposed to get it, but I'm gonna get it anyway. But you know what's wrong. I always tell people, everything I did bad, I knew it was bad, but I wanted to do it, and it was good. I enjoyed it, right? I was good at being bad. But it wasn't any devil that made me do it unless it was that one I seen in the mirror. I knew when I did bad, it was bad. I did it anyway. Why? Because I wanted to. What gets to the last thing, and I'm gonna cut this out, is that the one thing we need to find out, and the one thing that'll make you a happier person, is know the difference between your wants and your needs. In my life right now, there's nothing I want. And there's very few things I need. And that's why I'm a happy person. And that's why I enjoy life and enjoy other people. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was going to talk about your spiritual development and the different things that made you make changes in your life. But one of the things that stops us as human beings oftentimes is fear, the fear of change and the fear of launching into something new. But you had a really interesting story about when you were in the Army. You went to 82nd Airborne Jump School.
Yeah.
And you had to deal with the fear of jumping out of an airplane. And I wish you could tell us a little bit about that and how that helped you overcome your fear and how that applies to people in everyday life.
Okay. I read something the other day that I realized that was true. It said, fear is the first sin. And I thought about that. I read a book by a gentleman named Frank Herbert called Dune. You'll see the movies and stuff like that. Excellent book. The best science fiction novel ever written. Forget about all the other ones that came after one, but that one back there was the best one out. And in Dune, he had his character say, fear is the mind killer. He said, fear is the mind killer. I will let fear pass through me. And once fear passed through me, only I will remain. And the idea was you cannot be a human being if you have fear. Now, why do human beings have fear? It's so when you go on top of a building, you don't jump off, right? And so when you get in a terrible situation, that fear will come in and tell you, no, you need to extract yourself from that. That's one side of fear. The other side of fear, the most fear that we use most times, is the fear that paralyzes us. Should I go to this school? Should I ask this person to go out with me? Should I do this? Should I do that? That paralyzes. You cannot think. Think about the times, remember the times that you've really been afraid and try to ask yourself, could my mind work? Could I think? No. Because as Aristotle said, we are rational human beings. We are rational animals. We're supposed to use rationality. You're supposed to use reason. When you go up on that roof, it's not fear that's supposed to stop you. It's reason supposed to stop you. If I jump off this roof, I'm going to kill myself. I'm going to break something, right? So what we have to do, and I get back to the point about when I went into the Army. I went down to Fort Bragg, and I was going to be an airborne soldier because they paid me $50 extra a month. That's the only reason. It was capitalism. And you have 3 weeks you have to go to, and if you listen to I listened to the podcast, we talked about that. I was wrong. I said a 36-foot tower is a 34-foot tower. I forgot because I was kind of nervous when we made that podcast years ago. But anyway, you have there what you call Sergeant Black Hats. It's basically these guys, they buff, they big, they wear black hats, and they yell at you all the time. They try to make you quit, right, to see what you made of. And because I was off the street of the west side of Chicago, I wasn't going to quit, and nobody could make me quit because I've lived a rough life, so I was like that. But you go through the first week, and basically all you do is you run, because it's called Run Week, so, you know, that's self-descriptive. The second week is called Tower Week, and you have to go up there, and it's a 34-foot tower, and they strap you up, and they, you know, dry you up, and then they throw you off this 34-foot tower, and you're 1,000, 2,000, and you slide all the way down. And then the last week of Tower Week, you have a 250-foot tower. I know you guys have went to these fairs and seen these parachutes that go up and they drop you down, but they always have, well, when they drop you down in airborne school, you don't have something tethered to you. You drop down literally by yourself 250 feet. But the last week is jump week. That's when you do the real thing. Now, it's not normal for a human being to jump out of a moving plane. That's just not normal, you know? So, you know, you have to figure out, how can I get a person to do that? Well, you must get them to overcome their fear, period. You know, they do it all kind of ways, through abuse, through yelling, through screaming, to you know, challenging your manhood, to, you know, trying to embarrass you among your peers. They do it all kind of ways to get you to overcome your fear. And the best way they do it is by collectively having you all believe in something more than yourself, you know, to believe in each other. So the first jumps you have is in the C-130, right? It's a prop, you know, and, you know, they put a chute on you and it's all tight, you know, and it's heavy. And they put you on a plane and you have a static line which you know, hook to the middle of the aircraft, and you jump out and it'll pull your chute out for you, right? But, you know, you have to go there, and the first thing they tell you is stand in the door, and you're standing in the door and you're looking out. And I don't know if you ever looked out of a plane, you see all these little squares and stuff like that, but, you know, you're looking out and there's nothing in front of you. And you're like, man, this is, and the fear wells up on you. And you know, not only are you afraid, but as you're sitting on the plane before you take the jump, you look around and you notice everybody else is afraid too. But they handle fear in different ways. Some people joking, some people, you know, are trying to silently pray, but they don't want you to see them praying, you know. Some people are sweating, some people are worried. And the first thing you ask yourself, am I gonna be able to jump out of this plane, or am I gonna be pushed? Because they will do that. If you don't go, because you have a certain amount of time to get everybody out. And if somebody sticks in the door, then that other person, he's going to land further away. So, you know, the jump master will throw your butt out. You know, or basically what you used to do, they used to put a button to your back end. And when I took my first jump, you know, you got to jump out, and then you have a reserve in front of you. You have your main chute in back that's connected to the plane. As you come out, it'll pull your chute out. But you have 3 seconds. So you got to go, you know, you learn that through Tower Week. You go 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. If you don't feel a tug at 3,000, you better look up. And if you don't see anything, you better, because you're going straight down to the ground. And when I first came out and my time was coming to the door, and what you do, you in what they call a stick. And this is the door, and as people go, you just see people disappearing, right? And that adds to your fear, right? Because you're like, where's all these people going? And when I got to the door, I was like that. And my first jump, I was like, he might have to push me, right? But for some reason, I overcame my fear and I jumped. I was like, well, everybody else did. Why can't I? Because like I said, they build that camaraderie up into you. And then you jump and you're 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. And then you feel the tug. And then you're all right. And then you're good. And then all you hear is shh. It's like being an angel. Until you get about treetop, about 100 feet. And then instead of going down, the ground comes up. And then you got to land, which is always hard because that ground don't give. And you don't bounce, right? And so you get, 4 jumps like that, and then you get the night jump on a jet. You don't jump out of a jet because of the wash you have. In a jet, what you do is you walk out on a platform and then it takes you. I don't know when you were a kid, if you ever when you was driving down the road or somebody was driving down the road, you stuck your hand out the window and it goes like this. That's how it is when you jump, and especially when you get out of a jet. And the jet, and when you're going in a jet, and it was at night you can't see anything, right? Especially if you have a dark night, you don't see anything, right? And all you do is you walk out on that and you start seeing people just, that's all you see. And that's all you hear. And and they tell you, don't jump because you don't want to hit them turbines. Don't jump, just walk straight out and it'll push you out, right? That night jump, and and it's called a jet blast. And it's called the jet blast for a reason, because you are blast out of there, right? But you learn to undercover your fear, right? Even in the darkness, even at night. You learn to deal with your fear. And as I've gotten older, I learned that there's very few things I fear if I fear anything at all. The number one thing I don't fear death, because I know that life is everlasting. I can look at nature. What happens? Spring comes, everything buds. Then the summer, everything blooms. Then the fall, things start getting old, leaves start falling. Then in the winter, like me now, sap dries up, you get old, cripply, you don't have any leaves on top anymore. But guess what? What happens come March? So you think the divine will keep this going year after year after year after year, but what happens to you, you're just going to end? No. Like Aristotle said, we're rational animals. No. We just go from one iteration to the next. I've already told you what physics says. You cannot destroy energy and matter. And that's what you are. So if you can't be destroyed, and if you look out at nature, in the Quran, Allah says, if you want to know me, look out into the nature. I'm paraphrasing. So if you know by physics that you can't be destroyed, and you know by nature that you're always going to have rebirth, what is there to fear? What people fear is, I'm not going to be me. Well, you're not you anyway. You just don't realize that. I'm not going to be Doris Smith. You never were Doris Smith. You just thought you were. Because you never truly learned who you really were. And once you learn who you truly are, you realize this body is just a vessel, right? It's like an empty glass. I pour water in it. I drink the water, throw the glass away, but the water just changed into something else. And this is not platitudes, this is true. This is philosophy that has been taught since the beginning of Adam. All you have to do is research and read. I don't know anything more than you know. You know all this because all the knowledge you need to know, you already know it. You just have veils that you need to pull away. Exactly. I'm no smarter. I don't know anything more than anybody else knows. I just pulled a couple of veils back. In Islam, they say as we descend down into this mortal life, we have 70,000 veils that cover us from who we used to be. And if we want to ascend, we need to, while we're here, pull those veils out. That's why you hear this saying, die before dying. I don't know if anybody ever heard that saying before. Yeah. In other words, it's not mean physically die. It means understand who you truly are. That this thing that you call I, me, or whatever doesn't really exist. That's not really who you are. And if you do that, it'll make you happy. You know, because that's what philosophy was all about. Not talking about Western philosophy. Western philosophy is about language. Like, what is this? Is this a chair? You know, what is a chair and all this? True philosophy is all about how to live this human life. You know, how to be happy. You know, the Greeks used to call it eudaimonia, how to be happy. That's what philosophy is supposed to have been about. That's why they say, what is your philosophy of life? That's where that saying comes from. Philosophers are supposed to teach people how to live a good life, how to deal with this mortal life, to prepare for the next life, to get closer to the divine. That's what it's all about. You know, that's what philosophy is about. And religion gives you the ethic and moral code. Now, you can be ethical without being religious. Don't get me wrong. Because we have that ingrained in us. Like I said, we know what's right and wrong. We know what's good and bad. We know what we're supposed to do and what we don't supposed to do. We might lie to ourselves and say, no, I don't know that. But yeah, we do. We do. We do. But we like to fool ourselves. We fool ourselves a lot, you know, but that's the ego. The ego will always lie to you, just like your senses. You know, your senses will always lie to you. How you know the sky is blue? Somebody told you, right? How you know water is wet? Somebody told you. Everything that you think you know and you believe in, somebody told it to you. And the last thing I want to say is, think about this. You have never really seen yourself. All you've seen is a reflection. I've never seen myself. And you will never see yourself. Think about it. You know, you've seen reflections. When you look in the mirror, that's a reflection of who you are. And I guarantee you that reflection that you see is different from who I see, or different from who she sees when she looks at you. You know? Because the only way you can truly see yourself is you have to look inside and find out who you are. And that's the hard, believe me, that's a hard road, it's a hard journey, and a lot of us don't want to do it. A lot of us can't do it because it's scary. You know, always remember, you know, if you watch Star Wars and Luke went in the cave and he seen the person in the cave and it scared him. And remember what the face shown when the mask came off, the Darth Vader mask came off. You know, because whenever time we go into those dark places and we try to find ourselves, who do we see looking back at us? Ourselves. Because ourselves are our biggest fear, our biggest enemy. You know, when we have to really look at ourselves. That's why it's called inhumane to lock somebody up in solitary. Because you're left in there with yourself, with your thoughts in your mind. And unless you have training where you are used to being by yourself and you can go into your mind and you can see who you are, you don't get frightened, you don't get scared, you don't get lost. You know? Yes, sir.
I do have a burning question now.
Yeah.
Thank you, first of all, for being here.
No, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
I appreciate your service that you did for us in the Army.
Oh, thank you, Dad.
Yeah, I have this question in my mind that I've never had an opportunity to ask a person, a Muslim. And Mike, it's probably, I think you answered it already.
Okay, go ahead.
But I'm kind of puzzled as to why, like in the Middle East, it looks like the Muslims are fighting the Christians or the Hebrews and whatnot, what have you. And it seems to be over the same God. Am I getting that wrong or?
No, it's not over the same God, it's over power. You know,
God at the end of that?
Well, we use, when I say we, I'm talking about human beings.
Right.
We use all kind of excuses. We fight over, we try to make us killing each other a moral thing. But it's never a moral thing. You know, when you kill one person, you killed all humanity. Just like if you save one person, you saved all humanity. What are they doing now, especially in Gaza, which I'm afraid because people don't see patterns and they don't pay attention to history. This is not the end. They've killed, 7,000 kids, and then before that, 1,200 Israelis were brutally slaughtered. That wasn't the end of something, it's the beginning. Things will never go back to being the same there again. Those two people cannot live together because, believe it, take it from me, and I've had cousins like that, Arabs do not forget, and they always want revenge. And the Israelis are right. They said that if we pull down our weapons today, they will slaughter us. They're true. Because in 1929 in the city of Hebron, the Arabs rioted and they slaughtered 69 Jews. So they're right about that. And you also have, like I said, they've killed 7,000 children in Gaza, which hurts my heart. And they're not going to force those people to leave because it'll be another war. So those people are going to grow up with hate and vengeance in their heart. And then the Israelis got to live next to them, so they're going to grow, they're going to be more vicious, and they're going to be afraid because they know what's come after them, right? So it's a no-win situation. It's not the ending, but the beginning of something. I won't be around. I'm not president. I don't know. It's not about God and it's not about land anymore. It's like those old feuds you used to have between the Hatfields and the McCoy. It becomes more about the feud than what the feud was all about. That's where the ego takes over, right? So now the killing is not about God. It's about you kill my sister, you kill my brother, you kill my child, you kill this, so I'm gonna kill you. And they like, well, you did this to me, I'm dead. So it's not about land anymore because they can't live on the same land anymore. It's not about God anymore because what God would tell you to do this to each other? But they'll say it's about God. You know, when a terrorist goes blow up something, he says, Allah Akbar. It's called takbir in Arabic. Allah Akbar to a Muslim is a great thing. All it says is God is great. So why, when you go in to kill innocent people, you say Allah Akbar? Right? And then they say, well, it's because they think they're going to have 77,000 virgins or something like that. That's not in the Quran. I don't know where they get that from, but it's not in the Quran. You don't get, 7,000 virgins and stuff like that. That's silly anyway, right? But, these people do it because most of these people do it. They have no lives. They're usually losers. They'll, get some mullah or some imam or somebody to pump them up with all this stuff and tell them, you can be great in your life one time when you kill yourself and kill other people. It's not about God. It's not about the divine. Now, bad things happen for a reason. Blood is shed for a reason. We don't know. Why? Because we're not the divine. I always look at it this way. If I see an anthill, and I go over there and say, you know what, there's too many ants here. I need, because they started to mess with my plants. And I stomp half of them out. Now, to them ants, I could be God, right? And I just killed half of them. They don't know why I killed half of them. But I know why I did it. So that's how I look at what's going on now and what happens. Good and bad are the same thing. Right and wrong is the same thing. Tall and short is the same thing. I'm tall compared to somebody shorter than me, but I'm short compared to somebody taller than me. It's all relative, right? So, it's a thing in the Abrahamic religion called theodicy that David mentioned it last week, where people say, how can a good God have all these things happen, that terrible things happen? But then I ask myself, who are we to question the divine? And how do we know? How do my finite mind know what the infinite is thinking? I don't know. I know it's happening, and it's happening for a reason. It's terrible. I don't want to see it happen. But I know something's going to happen out of all of this. Something's going to come out of this. It reminds me of a story in the Quran where Moses went with Kidder. Kidder is like an angel. And Moses said, let me, go with you so I can learn the wisdom that you have. And Kidder said, no, you cannot go with me because you're not going to understand the things that I do. And then Moses begged him again and said, yes, I'm going to try to make this quick because I know we got to go. He said, yes, I'll be right, and I want to know this stuff, right? And I want to be, have the wisdom that you have. So Kidder says, okay, I'm going to let you go, but one thing you have to do is you cannot ask me any questions about what I do. So the first thing they did, they got on this boat, and this old man was on the boat, and the old man was, taking them across the river. And they were talking to the old man, and the old man was saying, yeah, this is the only boat I have, and it's the only boat that kept me, for my living. So I need this boat, to make my living, stuff like that. So when they got to the other side, and Kidder and Moses got off, Kidder caught the boat string, and the boat flew off, and the man was yelling and screaming and hollering because his boat flew away. So Moses got mad. Moses was like, why did you do that? That man needs that boat to make his living. You shouldn't do that. And Kidder said, remember your promise. You said you wouldn't ask me any questions. So he went to the next town, and there was 2 kids, right? And they were having trouble and stuff like that. So Kidder went into their house, and he stole their money. And he took their money, and he put it under a fence, and he buried it. So Moses got pissed off about that, right? Why did you do that to those kids, right? Those kids are orphaned and they're gonna need that money. And Kidder said, okay, you said, you weren't gonna ask me any questions. Why you still asking me questions? So he did one more action, but I'm not gonna mention that one. So then when it came down to it, Kidder got tired of Moses. He said, look, he said, the reason why I cut the man's boat away is because a king was going to come and he was going to confiscate his boat. And that way the man wouldn't have a way of making a living. But when the river subsides, the man can walk down and he can pick up his boat and he can still make his living. He said the townspeople was going to come and they was going to come in the house because they know their parents was rich and they was going to dig up the money and they was going to steal their money. This way, when the kids go and get older, they're gonna have to redo the fence, and when they redo the fence, they're gonna find the money under it, right? He said, now that you understand, you see that you don't really are wise like you should be. Coming back to what you asked me, why are they killing all these people? I don't know, but I know there's a reason. That's all I can tell you. I know there's a reason. Because, and I told Johnny this, everybody know biology. Everybody had, what they call it, sex education. I told my students, everybody's here for a reason. If you wasn't here for a reason, you'll be a spot on a sheet. Think about it. Think about it. How hard it is to make a baby. So if you wasn't meant to be here, if you weren't special, you wouldn't be here. The problem is a lot of us don't know why we're here, but we're here. What our job is to do is to find out why we're here. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jibril, for your time.
No problem.
I want to thank everybody for coming today, and thank you for joining us online for the midweek inspiration service here at Heartlight Spiritual Center. Hope you have a good day and a good week.
Thank
Let's see how you doing.